Welcome to Alexander in Focus. I'm your host, Alexander Orion Smith. Before we dive into today's investigation, I need you to do something important. Hit that subscribe button right now. Click the like button, drop a comment with your thoughts, and share this video with anyone who needs to know what's really happening in California. This is the kind of story the mainstream media won't touch, and your support keeps this channel going. Now let's talk about something that should terrify every Californian. $326 million. That's how much money disappeared from California's state budget in a single fiscal year. Not from a tax cut, not from some controversial spending program. From casino closures. Governor Gavin Newsom stood in front of cameras in Sacramento looking genuinely shaken. Reporters asked him a straightforward question. What's your plan for the communities about to lose their primary economic engine? His response was a masterclass in saying absolutely nothing. Vague platitudes about economic resilience, empty promises about diversification, no real answers, no concrete solutions. Behind closed doors, the situation is far worse than anyone is publicly admitting. Sources inside the California Gambling Control Commission have revealed something alarming. The number of tribal casinos facing serious financial distress has tripled in just 18 months. Small card rooms are shutting down at rates we haven't seen since the Great Recession. And the major casinos, the big names everyone knows, they're quietly cutting staff, reducing operating hours, and bracing for a future that looks nothing like the past 2 decades. This isn't a minor economic hiccup. This is a full-scale collapse of an industry that employs over 250,000 people. California operates more casinos than any other state in America. Over 70 tribal gaming facilities scattered across the landscape, hundreds of card rooms stretching from San Diego all the way up to the Oregon border. This isn't like Oklahoma or Connecticut where a handful of major casinos dominate the market. California's gambling industry is massive, sprawling, and deeply embedded in the state's economic infrastructure. These facilities generate billions in tax revenue, tribal government payments, and regional economic activity. They employ people in every corner of the state, from dealers and security personnel to restaurant workers and hotel staff. And right now, this entire industry is collapsing at an accelerating pace. Let me walk you through what's actually happening on the ground, because this story goes far beyond gambling. We're watching entire communities built on a specific economic foundation, and that foundation is crumbling beneath their feet. The state government appears to have no idea how to stop the bleeding. Or perhaps more accurately, they simply don't care enough to try. The closures are happening everywhere. A small casino in rural Northern California shuts its doors permanently. 2 regional casinos in Southern California announce closure dates within days of each other. San Manuel Casino in San Bernardino County closed first. Then Pechanga Casino near Temecula followed shortly after. These aren't tiny operations. These are significant employers in their regions. Each closure sends ripples through local economies that depend on casino traffic. Let's address the obvious question first. Why are California's casinos closing at such an alarming rate? The simplest answer most people want to give you is online gambling, and yes, that's certainly part of the equation, but it's not the complete picture, not even close to it. California has actually banned online sports betting twice in recent years. In November 2022, voters overwhelmingly rejected 2 ballot propositions. Proposition 26 would have permitted in-person sports betting at tribal casinos and horse racing tracks. Proposition 27 aimed to legalize online sports betting across the entire state. Both measures failed decisively. The campaigns leading up to that vote were absolutely brutal. Major companies like FanDuel and DraftKings poured over $400 million into advertising for Proposition 27. Meanwhile, tribal casino operators spent more than $250 million fighting against it. They understood what was at stake. When the dust settled, California voters rejected both options. The state remains one of the few major markets in America where you cannot legally place a sports bet. So if online sports betting isn't even legal in California, why are the casinos struggling so badly? Because Californians are betting anyway. They're just doing it through illegal offshore websites, or they're driving across the border into Nevada. But more importantly, the entire landscape of gambling and entertainment has fundamentally shifted in ways that California casinos simply cannot compete with under current regulations. Let's examine the actual numbers because they tell a compelling story. In 2010, California's tribal casinos generated approximately $8 billion in gross gambling revenue. By 2019, that figure had climbed to $9.2 billion. The growth wasn't explosive, but it was steady and reliable. The industry felt stable and sustainable. Tribal leaders were confident. Investors were satisfied. Employees had job security. Then 2020 arrived and everything changed. Casinos shut down completely for months during the pandemic. When they finally reopened, strict capacity restrictions made profitable operations nearly impossible. Many facilities operated at significant losses just to keep their staff employed and their doors open. Revenue began recovering in 2021. 2022 showed decent improvement. But then 2023 and 2024 revealed a troubling new reality. Revenue growth stalled completely. Multiple major casinos reported declining slot machine income. Table game revenue remained flat. But the most revealing statistic is this. Average visit frequency dropped significantly. People were coming to casinos far less often than before. Why is this happening? Several interconnected factors are at play. First, inflation has severely eaten into disposable income across the board. When gasoline costs $5 per gallon and grocery bills are 30% higher than they were 4 years ago, families cut back on entertainment spending. Casino visits are typically the first luxury to go. Second, California has some of the highest costs of living anywhere in the nation. The median home price in California now exceeds $700,000. Rent for a modest two-bedroom apartment in San Diego or the Bay Area runs over $3,000 per month. Millions of Californians are living paycheck to paycheck with zero margin for discretionary spending. These people don't have gambling money anymore. They're struggling to cover basic necessities. Third, and this is the aspect nobody in the casino industry wants to acknowledge publicly, California's casinos are getting old. Many tribal gaming facilities were constructed in the late 1990s and early 2000s. They haven't received significant updates or renovations since then. The interior decor feels dated and tired. The slot machines are older models that lack modern features. The restaurants and entertainment options feel trapped in a different era entirely. Younger customers walk through the doors and immediately sense they're in their grandparents' hangout spot. This isn't an atmosphere that appeals to millennials or Generation Z. Compare this to Las Vegas, which constantly renovates and reinvents itself to stay relevant. Look at new casinos opening in other states with cutting-edge designs, advanced technology integration, and entertainment concepts specifically tailored to younger demographics. California's casinos are losing the battle for entertainment dollars because they're offering an outdated product. But here's where the situation becomes truly dire. The casinos that are struggling aren't just cutting back on operations or reducing staff. They're closing their doors permanently. In 2023 alone, at least 14 small to mid-sized tribal casinos either shut down completely or drastically scaled back their operations. That might not sound like a massive number on its face. But consider this. Each of these facilities employed hundreds of people. They were frequently the largest employer in their entire county. These weren't just jobs. These were careers that supported entire families. Thunder Valley Casino in Lincoln is still operating successfully. Pechanga in Temecula is doing relatively well. San Manuel near San Bernardino continues to generate profit. But drive out to the smaller casinos in California's Central Valley, the northern regions, or the rural southern desert areas. You'll find shuttered buildings, empty parking lots, and for lease signs everywhere. The contrast is stark and depressing. The Scotts Valley Band of Pomo Indians spent years trying to open a casino in Sonoma County. The project ultimately died. The Guidaville Rancheria in Mendocino County closed their casino in 2021. It never reopened. The Elk Valley Rancheria in far northern California shut down operations in 2023 after years of steadily declining revenue. These aren't simply business failures you can brush aside. These are complete community disasters with profound human consequences. Tribal casinos operate fundamentally differently than corporate casinos. The revenue doesn't flow to distant shareholders or private equity firms. It goes directly to tribal members and funds essential services. Schools, healthcare facilities, housing developments, and infrastructure improvements for some of the most economically disadvantaged communities in California. When a tribal casino closes, that tribe loses its primary source of revenue. Social services disappear overnight. Per capita payments that tribal members rely on simply stop. People who finally achieved financial stability after generations of poverty are suddenly back to square one. If you're watching this video and thinking to yourself, wait, I had absolutely no idea this was happening, you're not alone. The mainstream media has barely touched this story. Major news outlets have ignored it almost completely. Drop a comment below if this information is new to you. Let's get this conversation out in the open. These are real people losing real livelihoods and real hope while politicians deliberately look the other way. Governor Newsom has been suspiciously silent on this entire crisis. When reporters manage to press his administration for answers, they receive vague promises about supporting tribal sovereignty and encouraging economic development. But there's no actual plan in place, no dedicated funding, no emergency task force, nothing of substance whatsoever. And here's why that represents a massive problem for California's fiscal future. California's state budget depends on casino revenue far more than most residents realize. Tribal casinos don't pay state income taxes under federal law. However, they do make substantial payments to the state under negotiated gaming compacts. These compacts were originally negotiated in the late 1990s and then updated throughout the 2000s. In exchange for the exclusive right to operate casino-style gambling in California, tribes pay a percentage of their revenue directly to state coffers. In a strong year, those payments total over $400 million. That money funds critical programs, problem gambling treatment and prevention programs, revenue-sharing payments to non-gaming tribes, grants to local governments impacted by casino operations. But as casinos struggle financially, those payments shrink dramatically. In fiscal year 2023 to 2024, the state received $326 million less in tribal gaming payments than originally projected. That's an enormous budget shortfall, and the projections for the next several years show the decline will continue. The State Budget Office is quietly adjusting their revenue forecasts downward to account for lower casino payments. But they're not publicizing these adjustments because doing so raises uncomfortable questions about California's overall fiscal health. Questions that Governor Newsom would prefer not to answer during an election cycle. Card rooms represent another huge component of this story, and they're actually dying even faster than tribal casinos. California has over 80 licensed card rooms operating throughout the state. These facilities offer poker and other card games, but cannot operate slot machines or traditional casino games like roulette or craps. They function under different legal frameworks than tribal casinos and pay taxes through entirely different mechanisms. Card rooms used to be absolute cash machines for local governments. Cities like Commerce, Bell Gardens, and Hawaiian Gardens built their entire municipal budgets around card room tax revenue. The Commerce Casino alone generated over $20 million per year for the city of Commerce. That's a city with fewer than 13,000 residents pulling in $20 million annually from a single business operation. That kind of revenue concentration creates dangerous dependency. But card rooms are now in complete freefall across California. At least 20 card rooms have permanently closed since 2020. Some shut down temporarily during pandemic lockdowns and simply never reopened. Others remain technically open but are barely surviving month to month. The Hollywood Park Casino in Inglewood closed in 2021. The Oaks Card Club in Emeryville shut down in 2022. The Lucky Darby Casino in Citrus Heights is gone. The list continues growing every month. Why are card rooms collapsing so rapidly? Competition from tribal casinos is certainly one factor. But the fundamental issue runs deeper. Card rooms are heavily regulated, expensive to operate, and increasingly don't appeal to younger customers at all. Poker experienced a massive boom in the mid-2000s thanks to televised World Series of poker tournaments and the rise of celebrity poker. That boom is completely over now. Younger generations aren't playing poker the way their parents did, and card rooms can't adapt to changing preferences because they're locked into offering specific games by state law. They cannot add slot machines. They cannot offer sports betting. They cannot expand into other forms of gambling. They're essentially stuck offering a product that fewer and fewer people want to purchase. Cities that built their budgets around card room revenue are now panicking. Bell Gardens, for example, derived over 40% of its entire general fund from the bicycle casino. When that casino's revenue drops, the entire city budget enters crisis mode. We're talking about cutting police departments, fire services, parks, and public libraries because the casino isn't generating expected revenue anymore. Multiply this scenario across dozens of California cities, and you begin to see the true scale of the crisis. This isn't just an industry problem. This is a fundamental threat to municipal government operations across the state. Now let's discuss jobs, because this crisis extends far beyond tax revenue and tribal payments. We're talking about 250,000 Californians who work in the casino industry. Casino employment spans a wide range of positions: dealers and slot machine attendants, security personnel and surveillance operators, housekeeping and maintenance staff, food service workers and restaurant managers, administrative personnel and executive leadership. These aren't minimum wage positions either. Casino dealers in California typically earn $60,000 to $80,000 annually when you include tips. Security and supervisory positions pay comparable wages. For people without college degrees, especially those living in rural communities, casino jobs have represented a reliable pathway to middle-class income and stability. When casinos close, those jobs vanish completely, and there's nothing available to replace them in most regions. Consider California's Central Valley. Small towns like Lodi, Porterville, and Madera built entire economic ecosystems around nearby tribal casinos. Workers commuted from surrounding communities every day. Local businesses depended on casino employees and visitors for their customer base. When a casino shuts down permanently, the entire regional economy takes a devastating hit. Unemployment in some rural California counties already exceeds 8%. Remove a major casino employer, and you're suddenly looking at double-digit unemployment rates. This creates a vicious downward spiral. People leave to find work elsewhere. Businesses close because there aren't enough customers. Property values collapse. Tax revenue declines sharply. Schools and public services deteriorate from lack of funding. Governor Newsom loves talking about California being the world's fifth largest economy. But that prosperity is heavily concentrated in Silicon Valley, Los Angeles, and San Diego. Vast stretches of California are economically struggling, and casinos represented one of the few genuine bright spots in these regions. Now that economic engine is disappearing. If this analysis is making you angry, hit that like button and share this video. People across the state need to understand what's happening while media outlets ignore it and politicians pretend everything is fine. Here's another critical angle that receives almost no attention. California's regulatory environment is actively strangling the casino industry. California maintains some of the strictest gambling regulations anywhere in the country. That's not inherently problematic. Regulations exist to prevent criminal activity, protect consumers, and ensure fair gaming practices. But California has taken regulatory oversight to an extreme that makes meaningful adaptation nearly impossible. Want to introduce a new game to your casino floor? You need formal approval from the California Gambling Control Commission, which can take months or even years. Want to renovate your aging facility? Environmental impact reviews, tribal government approvals, and state permit processes create an absolute bureaucratic nightmare. Want to explore partnerships with online platforms for digital customer engagement? Not legally permitted under current state law. Meanwhile, states like Nevada, New Jersey, and Pennsylvania have created flexible regulatory frameworks that enable casinos to innovate and adapt. They've legalized various forms of online gambling. Mobile sports betting is fully operational. Hybrid models that seamlessly blend physical and digital experiences are thriving. California casinos remain trapped in a 20-year-old business model with no legal pathway to modernize their operations. Tribal leaders have been actively lobbying Sacramento for years to update gaming compacts and permit greater operational flexibility. They've made zero meaningful progress. The state legislature is completely paralyzed by competing interests and constituencies. Labor unions have their priorities. Anti-gambling advocacy groups push their agenda. Different tribal nations have conflicting goals. Nothing moves forward through this political gridlock. Governor Newsom possesses the executive authority to push this issue onto the legislative agenda. But he hasn't done so. Why not? Most likely because it's politically toxic for him. Online gambling and expanded casino gaming remain controversial topics in California. Taking a strong public position either direction would alienate key voter constituencies he needs for his political future. So Newsom does what he does best. Absolutely nothing. He avoids the issue entirely and hopes it resolves itself somehow. Let's zoom out and examine the broader national context, because California's casino crisis isn't happening in isolation. Nationwide, casino revenue has been flat or actively declining in numerous markets. Atlantic City remains a shell of its former glory. Mississippi Gulf Coast casinos are struggling badly. Even markets that initially boomed after legalization, like Pennsylvania and Maryland, are now seeing significantly slower growth rates. The underlying reason is straightforward. Gambling has been completely commoditized as an entertainment option. 30 years ago, if you wanted to gamble, your options were severely limited. Travel to Las Vegas or Atlantic City. Maybe visit a riverboat casino in the Midwest. That was essentially it. Today, casinos exist everywhere across America. 40 states now have some form of legalized gambling operations. You can bet on sports from your smartphone in over 30 states. You can play online poker, digital slot machines, and live dealer games without ever leaving your house. The market is oversaturated with gambling options. There are simply too many casinos chasing too few active gamblers. And the gamblers who do participate are spreading their money across far more options than ever before, which means less revenue per individual casino property. California's casinos were somewhat insulated from this trend initially because the state prohibited online gambling. But that protective barrier is rapidly evaporating. Californians are using offshore gambling websites or driving to Nevada to place bets. The money is flowing out of California, and state casinos cannot do anything about it under current law. Here's the fundamental existential question facing the industry. What happens when casinos aren't special anymore? For decades, casinos functioned as destinations. You planned a trip. You got excited about going. It felt like a genuine event and experience. Now gambling is simply another entertainment option competing with streaming services, video games, concerts, sporting events, and dining experiences. And for younger demographic groups, gambling doesn't even rank particularly high on their preference list. Generation Z and millennials gamble significantly less than baby boomers and Generation X. Multiple studies demonstrate that younger people strongly prefer experiential spending over games of chance. They'd rather allocate their disposable income toward travel, music festivals, or social activities than sitting alone at a slot machine. The average age of a casino customer in California is now over 50 years old and climbing steadily every single year. That represents a demographic time bomb ticking away. As older gamblers literally age out of the market, casinos desperately need younger customers to replace them. But younger customers simply aren't walking through the doors in sufficient numbers. In the next 5 years, expect significantly more closures across California. Industry analysts predict that at least 30 to 40% of the state's smaller casinos will either shut down permanently or be forced into consolidation arrangements. The major casinos located near large population centers will likely survive this crisis. But rural and remote casino operations are living on borrowed time at this point. Tribal communities that depend entirely on casino revenue will face absolutely devastating cuts to essential services. Some tribes may lose their primary economic engine completely. We're talking about schools closing, health clinics shutting down, per capita payments to tribal members stopping entirely. The poverty that casino revenue helped lift people out of will come roaring back with a vengeance. California has a documented pattern of ignoring obvious economic warning signs until they metastasize into full-blown crises. The housing affordability crisis, the homelessness epidemic, the mass exodus of businesses and residents to other states. Now add the casino industry collapse to that list. In every single case, the warning signs were clearly visible years in advance. In every case, politicians kicked the can down the road instead of taking action. And in every case, working-class people paid the ultimate price. California casinos employed people who couldn't get tech industry jobs. They provided crucial revenue to communities that had nothing else economically. They gave tribal nations a realistic path to self-sufficiency and dignity after generations of poverty. And now, because of regulatory paralysis, market oversaturation, and political cowardice, that's all crumbling away. The casino industry in California is dying right before our eyes. Hundreds of facilities are closing or teetering on the brink. 250,000 jobs hang in the balance. Entire communities are about to lose their economic foundation completely. And the governor's response is essentially to shrug and talk about resilience and adaptation. That's not leadership, that's criminal neglect. So here's my question for everyone watching. Do you think California's casino closures are a symptom of a much bigger economic problem facing the entire state? And what should Governor Newsom actually do about this crisis? Drop your honest thoughts in the comments section below. I want to hear from people who are living this reality every day, not politicians reading prepared talking points. Thanks for watching Alexander in Focus. Subscribe right now if you want continued coverage of the stories that truly matter. The stories that mainstream media refuses to investigate. Share this video with someone who needs to understand what's really happening in California. I'll see you in the next investigation.